Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Today I'm here with Twan
Hello.
and Issam.
Hey everybody.
We are here to discuss the first round of the UCI Cyclocross World Cup, and that took place in Waterloo. It's already evening for us, but with all the love we make this podcast because we were treated with some great racing, and Issam will tell us about what happened in the men's race.
Yeah, indeed, in the men's race we saw a very strong start from Quinten Hermans. Vanthourenhout was able to follow. Behind that, it was Van der Haar and Bastaans that were also able to show themselves in the first lap. Hermans was able to break actually from the group. Only Vanthourenhout was actually able to sit in his wheel. And then we saw in that first lap a little bit of rain coming down. We saw some drizzles on the camera lens. And well, we were not really thinking that would hamper the race, and how wrong we were. Because in the second lap on the asphalt descent, when they're going up the hill to run on it, a few crashes occurred with Quinten Hermans, who was leading that race at that moment, crashing. Also Thibaut Nys was also crashed there. Tonaerts crashed there as well, and that actually influenced the race quite a lot, because one of the guys that had a bad start in the beginning of the race was able to capitalize on that, and that was Iserbyt, because he was nowhere in the first lap. But after the crashes, he came through the field very quickly. Vanthourenhout was up front. He had a gap, but he threw away his gap to Iserbyt because he crashed as well in that second lap, and it was a madness. A lot of things happened in those two laps. It's very hard to summarize, but in the end, it was Vanthourenhout and Iserbyt that got away as a duo, and behind them, it was actually Van der Haar that tried to bridge to them, and Quinten Hermans, that had a pretty bad crash as well, recovered, came to Van der Haar, and then was like, well, I have to maybe try myself and get back to those guys. He came pretty close to 16 seconds, a real fighting spirit from him, but in the end he was not really able to get closer to Iserbyt and Vanthourenhout, or at least not to Iserbyt, because Iserbyt saw the danger and then attacked from Vanthourenhout in a way and was able to get away. Hermans came pretty close to Vanthourenhout, but in the end was just not close enough, and Vanthourenhout maintained that second place. So in the end it was Iserbyt that won in Waterloo, with Vanthourenhout in second, and the great fighter in third in the name of Quinten Hermans.
Let's start by talking about that beginning of the race. You mentioned it in your summary. We saw that rapid start by Quinten Hermans, and we are used to that start by Quinten Hermans. But usually, well, he is a rapid starter, but you can see like this long chain of riders in his wheel. But today was different. He immediately opened the gap, only Vanthourenhout able to follow. That was really impressive to see, in my opinion.
Yeah, it definitely was, and I think what was very important in that start to see as well was that there was, Vanthourenhout was able to follow, and Iserbyt was not there, Tonaerts was not there, Van der Haar was not there, and Vanthourenhout immediately, when in the first lap when they passed, Quinten Hermans asked him to relay with him, but he was not willing to do so because Iserbyt was behind, and Hermans, instead of not relaying or not really pushing to let Vanthourenhout sit in his wheel, he just continued to pace. So he felt very strong, and yeah, up until that crash, he was in control of the race.
Yeah, about that crash, it was a really chaotic part of the race because we saw a bit of drizzle, and all of a sudden it started pouring down, and there was this section, I think it was right at the back of the Trek factory, and they came like from the grass in a downhill onto tarmac, which was downhill before they went to the steep hill. And this was like so slippery. I don't know, perhaps there was some kind of oil or whatever there, but riders were falling everywhere. We saw first already a bit of a slip by Vanthourenhout, who was leading. Then it was Hermans going down, followed by Aerts going down in the first corner of that section. When Aerts was gone, Nys went down. Later on, Verstrynge also went down. And there were a couple of other riders who also went down, who I do not know the names of. But it basically, to me, looked like I was watching a Formula 1 race, where everyone was on dry tires, and it started pouring down.
It was certainly a hard moment to adapt, I think, for everyone in the race, which I think it's really fun to see. Usually we either have a completely dry race or like on a slipperier surface because earlier rain, or it's like completely raining the whole time. And it was really interesting to see how who coped best with it. It was of course really unfortunate to see some of the riders crash in this adaptation process.
Yeah, probably the riders who took the biggest hits were Nys and Verstrynge. They were Nys DNF the race. He probably broke his collarbone. That is what the reports from Play Sports have told us. Verstrynge also had a big hit. I think he still continued, but he ended something like 40th out of 48 riders, so not great for him either. I mean, we can only hope that for Nys that it isn't a collarbone or that it's just light fracture, that he doesn't need to undergo surgery for it. But he also, I didn't mention this, but it wouldn't surprise me if he also has a concussion, because he hit that concrete wall very hard with his head.
Yeah, it was a nasty crash. I think he crashed the hardest out of them all, at least visually. So, yeah, he DNF'd immediately there. He didn't try to get up on his bike. So I think he must have been hurt quite badly in a way. But when he was sitting in that kind of car, or whatever you want to call it, that kind of golf car in a way, probably back to the camper, he looked okay in a way. So I think, I don't think it's going to be a collarbone. You know, he didn't break his collarbone, or fraction at least. I don't think that is the case. I think it's he's pretty badly hurt, and maybe his campaign in America is over.
Yeah, you just know it's real bad when a cyclist doesn't like get up within the first 5 seconds, right? And try to grab their bike again.
Yeah, that's bad, and especially the place where he was. If you go through that corner, you can't see him. It was slippery, so somebody could have gone down and smashed into him, and that would have made it even more nasty. He wasn't the first to go down there. His teammate Toon Aerts went down before. As I said, there have been multiple things. People said that it was the first rain in a long time, which isn't true. It has been raining earlier this week there. That rain caused the top layer of the parkour already to vanish, and then the sun was on it, so it got baked out. You saw this path actually, and then the grass was higher, so you could see that the top layer was gone there. If it then starts raining, it becomes really slippery. So I reckon it was either there was some kind of oil there, or something that made it slippery. It was new tarmac, that's always slippery. Or perhaps they were just racing with tires with almost no profile, maybe wrong tire pressure for those conditions, who knows. Anyway, Toon Aerts going down there, he also was hit bad. He dropped back quite a few places. I think he was 15th at some point after that crash, and he couldn't get back into a rhythm after that, which obviously isn't weird. But after that, in the second half of the race, he recovered pretty well, in my opinion. I think he can be satisfied.
Yeah, the most important thing here is just to limit the damage. And I think the bigger differences, of course, can indeed be made now, but he can do a lot of damage limitation over like the Christmas period when the big three are back, and he might be able to beat some of them, unlike some of the others.
Well, definitely true. I mean, the calendar is long. I think this isn't a major hit to his overall ambitions, because he finished 6th in the end, getting beaten by Niels van der Putten, who had a bad start because of his bad starting position, and then basically after that crash of Aerts, followed Aerts to the front. Van der Putten ultimately outsprinted Aerts with a very strong punch at the end of the race in that final straight, which is pretty short. He comfortably outsprinted Aerts. He got 5th, which is his best World Cup result. I think both can be happy, and I mean, as we already said, for Aerts, there's still 15 World Cups left. There's no guarantee that Iserbyt won't have a race where he's either sick or has a crash or has a mechanical. Everything is wide open.
Yeah, that sprint as well of Niels van der Putten, very eager to get that good placing. Really nice to see that ride by him, and hopefully he can continue these. Yeah, I tend to notice Van der Putten has a few of these good performances every once in a while, and good to see he's able to reach a 5th place in the World Cup here.
Well, and then about Hermans and Vanthourenhout. I mean, Hermans was the leader, or at least I think he was leading at the moment when he crashed, or at least he was very close with Vanthourenhout. He went down there. That wasn't a big hit, but later on he went down and tumbled over the banner, which was on a later part in the course. And I mean, Hermans, he also said it afterwards, and it really looked like that. He said he had one of the best days on his bike ever. And it did look like that. He looked super strong. Without those 2 crashes, I mean, I think he could have competed or maybe even comfortably have won this race.
Yeah, that second one looked a bit silly, right? It looked a bit like slow motion as he tumbled over. Like you saw it happening and you were like, oh, please hold it. But he wasn't quite able to. But yeah, he looked amazing today, and it's really unfortunate that he couldn't keep it upright both times.
Yeah, to explain a bit more, what happened there was it was in a downhill, and coming out of 180 degrees corner there, his back wheel slipped, and he knew he was losing control, so he tried to correct it with like his body, but then he ultimately lost balance and tipped over, and then his speed was already low as he was braking. Well, after all these crashes happened, we saw Eli Iserbyt storm to a front. Eli Iserbyt had a shocker of a start. I think it was around P12, P15, something between there after that start. But he basically cycled through all these crashes. All the riders around him crashed out. He overtook a couple of riders, and then he thought, okay, it's been enough. I'm going to close that gap to Vanthourenhout. And of course, Vanthourenhout made it a bit easier by crashing himself.
Yeah, and then he continues to keep finding like better lines, getting there, and yeah, eventually you just notice that the race is only going one way as Iserbyt is just finding more grip, more power, and Vanthourenhout didn't really stand a chance in the end, I think.
There was also, I think, with Iserbyt that when they passed Groenendaal, they were talking something about tire pressure. He capitalized on the circumstances. He was one of the few guys that was able to, not make a mistake or a big mistake. And I think that gave him in the end the win. But overall, he was, especially in the end of the race, he looked very good. And I think we missed out on a great battle between Hermans and Iserbyt. Maybe Toon Aerts as well, a little, but it's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, you could see Iserbyt was looking for more grass than Vanthourenhout. I don't know what choices they made in terms of pressure and tires during the race. I'm 100% sure that everyone changed to at least lower tire pressure, but probably to another thread as well. We don't have information on that as there were no pit reporters here, but otherwise you don't go into the pits when it starts raining, because it wasn't to get a clean bike. It was definitely some kind of change. But you could see Iserbyt was taking different lines, and as Twan said, you had the feeling Iserbyt was really in control. And Vanthourenhout then, in that downhill with that big rut in it, he started to struggle, and ultimately he got distance once, managed to come back, and then on another downhill he made a mistake. He forgot to shift gears, and after the downhill he was stuck in a too big gear to come back up to speed on the off camber, and then Iserbyt was gone, and Vanthourenhout almost got overtaken by Hermans, but then he managed to repack himself and stay in front of Hermans. Vanthourenhout, of course, skipped the Super Prestige in Gieten, basically giving up his Super Prestige classification to be good in this race. Can he, considering what he did, or especially did not, ride in Gieten, can he be happy with his second place?
Yeah, I have the feeling he was hoping for more.
He can be happy with it, but he said already before the season that he's going to skip a few races just to make sure that he's going to be ready when the season is going to be more packed. So I think there is a bigger plan behind it, and it seems that probably is focusing on that World Cup in a way. There are 16 races, so it wouldn't be weird. I think a second place for him, second place for him is not going to be that bad. So yeah, it was probably the highest possible what he could achieve today.
Yeah, I think Paul Sauze definitely made some choices. They are probably putting Zweek all in on the Super Prestige. Zweek isn't going to the United States. He says, well, I disagree with what he says. He said we are going to the United States for a couple of years now to promote our sport, but I don't see any talents coming through from the United States, so I think it's useless. Very short touch upon that. I think it's way too early to say that. Cross Vegas was the first World Cup in the United States. It was first on the calendar in 2015. It was later added with Iowa, and then Vegas got replaced with Waterloo. This is just way too short. You could see today there were plenty of spectators. In my opinion, we had a nice course, but it just looks like Paul Sauze has made some choices. Vanthourenhout is going for the World Cup. Zweek is going for the Super Prestige, and Iserbyt is just going for everything as he's their best rider.
Yeah, I think it's a bit. It's always the same story when we come closer to the American races in a way. Some of the guys that are more, that like Mette Penninger, for example, they always have some tendency to complain about these races, and then every year they have the tendency to come back again. So I think they do something right in the States, and in my opinion, I was very happy. I loved it in a way. I think there are obviously a lot of points that they can improve on, even with the live feed, the camera work and stuff. I think they can work on that as well. Parkour was all right. There were some things that might be changed and adjusted in a way, but overall, I think the races in the States are amazing and very good for the sport.
Yeah, and the races in the States are so much more than just the World Cup. I mean, where do you see legends of the sport like Sven Nys dressing up like clowns and racing against other people, drinking beers after the race, dressing like a pizza, doing tricks on their bike, sitting on the steer, riding backwards? I mean, it's just a great circus there, and I think it really is worth the trip. And yes, it is expensive for a team, and no, I do not blame riders if they don't go because of the high costs. But in my opinion, it would also be a bit pathetic to ask for the organizers to actually pay the teams to go. Because the Belgian team races, they don't pay for Felipe Aerts to come from Alicante every week. They don't pay for Catablanca Vas to come. They don't pay for, I don't know who, for Pitcock to come, for Turner to come. They also have expenses. I guess it's maybe just part of it. And I mean, of course, can't look in their financing, but I mean, there's also other riders that have gigantic costs.
Yeah, we go now on a dangerous road in a way, because we can have this discussion for a while, but I think that that there are compromises that needs to be made to make the sport a little bit more, to give it a bigger reach in a way. And I think one of the compromises should be the cost. I think they have the money to do it. It's not like they don't have the money, especially the bigger teams. So yeah, you have to take a couple of things in consideration and maybe do the planning a little bit better, because I think there's a lot of money to gain going to the States and even to other countries.
Anyway, we should return to the World Cup and Waterloo. Let's run down the entire top 10 then. Iserbyt won in front of Vanthourenhout and Hermans. Lars van der Haar riding a solid race in 4th place. Niels van der Putten 5th in front of Toon Aerts, who ended 6th. 7th place for Vincent Baastans in front of Ryan Kamp. 9th place Jens Adams, and Corné van Kessel rounds off the top 10. I would like to briefly touch upon Vincent Baastans. We have seen him race the US Cyclocross Series in the United States throughout the past couple of weeks, winning 4 out of 4 races there. He ended 7th today. This is his second top 10 in a UCI World Cup, the other one being Koksijde 2017, and it's his best result ever in a World Cup. I think he can be very happy. I mean, oftenly we talk quite jokingly about Baastans, that he goes to these B crosses and then wins there with like a huge margin. But I think today he rode a very good race and he can be happy with this result.
Decision to go very early to the United States clearly paying off, adapting very well to the racing there, finding, of course, in the previous 2 weeks similar kind of park courses as the US cyclocross courses are a bit different build than the ones we have in Belgium, and he's just taken it very well and picked out one of the best results of his career.
Then I would like to touch briefly upon a couple of names outside of the top 10. Kevin Kuhn in 13th, the first rider who isn't from the Netherlands or Belgium. He barely beats Kerry Warner, and then Thijs Aerts 15th. But in 16th place, a very surprising name, Davide Toneatti. I've seen his name come across a couple of times. I remember him being 4th, I think, in the World Cup of Namur as a junior. After that, I think I saw him race a couple of Italian races last year with Aru. But, I mean, especially for the mainstream cyclocross follower, this name is a big surprise. He was 12th at some point, usually in 15th, ultimately dropped back in the last couple of laps. Not strange in such a long race, but very surprising result by the just 20-year-old Italian.
Hopefully a sign of things to come. This is really promising if you're able to do this on such a big scene.
Definitely, I've looked through his results and he's gotten a couple of podiums at the under-23 national championships. This year he was 4th in the Toy Cup. So fingers crossed that he can improve a bit, and when we have the under-23 World Cup he can compete with the Belgians and Dutch. Well, I think we've covered it all for the men's race. Now we can talk about the women's race, which was even more exciting.
Yeah, the women's race, we would have a very fast start by Magali Rochette, but unfortunately she would draw back as throughout the cross we had a group of 7 women which would stretch out and come back together and stretch out, but it was usually Lucinda Brandt and Marianne Vos that were ahead. Annemarie Worst sometimes managing to put herself up there, Nys Betsema as well, Catablanca Vos being close by, Yolanda Neff and Van Clauzel, the other 2 women who were usually more to the back end of that group but still very much in the race. But throughout the race we really saw that Lucinda Brandt and Marianne Vos were slightly better than them. Betsema having a mechanical really hindered her race quite a bit. But Vos really mastering the art of sitting in 2nd place this cross, and she would come out in the final lap and beat Lucinda Brandt, and it would be Betsema coming in 3rd place.
I think first of all we have to start by taking back our statements we've made in the preview podcast of the season and the preview podcast of the World Cup here in Waterloo about Vos. I mean, we were very harsh on her, or very harsh. We were pretty skeptical based on her previous season, but today she proved us very wrong.
Yeah, this is one of the courses in the season where I would say this is one of the best for her, but I did not expect this based on last year, and it's really good to see that she is able to do this, and hopefully she can bring it on this season and challenge the women.
I mean, I definitely agree this is a perfect course for her. She won here in 2018 as well, and I did expect her to be good. We know she was in great form, 2nd in Paris-Roubaix last week, 2nd at the World Championships Road a week before. I did expect her to come in the top 10. I would expect maybe a top 5, but she was really good. I mean, she was the only one able to follow Brandt. Throughout the entire race, I had the feeling Brandt and Vos are definitely the strongest, and Vos she really could follow, and she barely made any mistakes.
And riding a great tactical race as well. Like every time you looked at the screen, she would be in 2nd place basically. It was just a class performance in positioning yourself and then not committing any of the mistakes and saving the energy for that final lap for an all-out push for victory.
Yeah, I had the feeling that it was a pretty tactical race. Brandt and Vos rode together, and Vos really marked Brandt, knowing Brandt was the strongest. Of course, Betsema was in the mix, but Betsema dropped her chain because she was shifting gears when she went through a bump, and then her chain fell. She needed to get off, cost quite some time. But in my opinion, it was pretty interesting. I mean, I always had the feeling Vos and Brandt were the strongest, but because they were playing games and the others could come back, at some point you had the feeling, if they look at each other, maybe Neff, maybe Worst, maybe Vos, maybe Clauzel, maybe they can do something.
Yeah, you were always in the race. It was always kind of catch-up game in a way, and that was very nice to see. I think Vos made it very clear to Brandt that she was she trusted a lot in her sprint, and I think Brandt didn't really know what to do with it. And yeah, it was kind of the moment she saw that Vos is not really helping her relaying to keep it in front. She just decided to just keep the pace drop again, and then it was for the others to catch up. And I think it was very good to see that we could see Clauzel and Vas and Neff as well as foreigners in the women's cyclocross a little bit, also in front. And we have a podium with only Dutch women, but it was definitely very good to see.
Well, let's talk about Neff actually, because she had a blistering start. She came storming through the outside, making it clear that she came here to race, then moved to the front. Ultimately, she could stick in the wheel of Betsema, who brought her back. I did see that Neff, you could clearly see, yes, she did the Trek CX Cup on Friday, which she won, but you could clearly see that she lacked a bit of rhythm on the cyclocross bike. She was a bit rusty. If I compare this to the Neff that won the GP Sven Nys in Baal, I can see that Neff was a bit more and a bit finer technique. But this Neff here that I saw today, it gives potential because next time she can start on the first row.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, that Neff that we saw in Bao, that was also a Neff that had done already a couple of races. So it will come in time, I think. And if she's, I don't really know what her plans are gonna be actually for the cyclocross this season. At least I don't know what her campaign will be. I think she will do the other American races, but from there I have not really an idea. Maybe she's gonna do a World Cup. Maybe she's gonna focus on mountain bikes. She doesn't have an Olympic campaign or anything. It's basically only the World Cup mountain bike next year. So we will see what she's gonna decide. But I really hope that she's gonna do a little bit more races, because I think that if she kinda gets the rhythm in a way, and the handling of the bike, and doesn't get that rusty like you say, I think she definitely can be someone that will be fighting for a couple of podiums and maybe even wins.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's also what I was kind of hinting towards. I mean, she was missing something, and that was just the rhythm. And it's not strange. She hasn't been on the cyclocross bike, I think, for 2 seasons now, or at least 1 for sure. But I mean, Vos also had serious issues. I mean, Vos looked strong in my opinion. She had the power, but I mean, on that steep hill though, she was struggling with shouldering her bike, standing still while shouldering. The other time she just tried to hold her bike next to her, trying different sides. I mean, in the last 2 laps, she was almost a moving chicane there. I mean, she got past left, right, and center, and that's also the only time Vos got in trouble. I mean, Brand at some point attacked, and Vos was there, and on that climb, Vos was blocking Vos, and Brand could open a gap, but Vos came back. But there you could really see that Vos, I mean, we already saw it last year. I had hoped it would have improved as she's working with Lars Boom, or at least Lars Boom is working within SD Works. But so far, no proof of that.
Yeah, I thought there was quite some talk about her improving her cyclocross specific abilities, but they were hard to spot this race, so hopefully it will come as she gets further into the racing for the season.
Let's talk about that last lap then, because the last lap was really amazing. Great battle between Brand and Vos. Now, I don't mention Betsema. I mean, Betsema was there, but Betsema was already dropped and then came back. And let's first talk about Betsema. Betsema rode a really weird last lap.
It's just the moment they go into the last lap, you're right. There were 3, but like you kind of know that Betsema is gonna come third, because she doesn't have that killer instinct of finding the right moments to get to the front and then putting it down and creating that gap that she needs to avoid sprinting against the other 2.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And I mean, it was also very weird the way she placed herself up front on the place that she shouldn't have been up front, I think. And then after that, she didn't really try to do anything. I think that the pace was low enough to try something. Even if you're even if you have no energy at all, you're still able to place yourself in a decent position. And sometimes, like, I'm not saying that she could have been second or she could have been first, but I definitely think that she could have tried a little bit more. And it was almost like she knew that she had no sprint, and she was like, well, then I'm not even gonna try my hardest. I'm just gonna be here for my position and try to be a little bit more in front for the safety more than for position.
In my opinion, it was also weird when they went through this part of the woods. There was one clear racing line, and Brand was coming around the outside, and instead of sticking to that racing line, leaving no other way to go for Brand, she goes off the racing line, opening the door for Brand. I mean, it's just not something you should do, but it provided us with a great battle after that. Brand and Vos jockeying for position. Ultimately, Brand went into prime position, I think. She was at the front in the right moment, and then we came to this last steep hill, and she was either completely done, or she tried to do a trick because she could barely make it up this hill, and then ultimately got out accelerated by Vos. I have to admit, at first I thought this was a trick. It's a trick that if you barely make the top, that the rider after you needs to unclip and then loses the position. But when I looked at it again, personally, I don't think this was the case, because the way Vos was able to accelerate after that and Brand wasn't, Brand immediately looked back, where is Betsema? And then Brand also didn't even try to pull alongside on the bridge. I think Brand was really done.
And the way that that Marianne Vos actually positions herself onto that hill, her line, I thought it was really smart. Like, she accounted for this trick by choosing like a slightly different line that she could keep the speed regardless of what Brand was doing. So like I think it was just also very smart racing by her. They really pushed each other to the limits there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was great to watch Vos ultimately taking the win in front of Brand, Betsema, Neff, Vorst and Vas. Clauzel ending 7th. Very, very strong race by Helena Clauzel. Surprised to see her in 7th place. Puk Pieters ended 8th, Jara Kastelein in 9th and Rochette in 10th. I already mentioned Clauzel just now. I think you guys feel probably the same about her performance as I do.
It was really strong, and I expected her to fall back a bit further, like Rochette did after a very strong start. But yeah, she just kept a very solid 7th place, kept on coming back in the race, and it looked like she might just be able to get a top 5 there.
Definitely, ultimately, she just fell short. Some interesting facts, by the way, about Vos. She was riding on a Cervelo cross bike, which hasn't been released yet. We do not know a lot about that bike, but Wout van Aert will also be riding that this season, as far as we know. She also claimed another World Cup victory, and this victory puts her on top of the all-time World Cup victories. And she was already on top, but she was tied with Katie Compton. Now she is on top by herself. Well, I would also like to talk about the riders in 10th, 11th and 12th before we round off this episode. Rochette in 10th, I think a solid result by her, but a surprising result by another Italian, Gaia Realini, ended 11th.
Yeah, I expected a little bit more from Rochette, not gonna lie. I think she started very fast and very promising. I thought that would maybe, bring her into a top 5 or a solid top 10. In the end, she finished 10th. Not bad result, definitely not. But, I thought that maybe she could have been ahead of Pieters and Kastelein, but it is what it is. But the Italian Realini is, definitely a very, very promising result. And, someone that only 20 at the moment, a solid result, and someone we maybe gonna see a little bit more in the under 23 races.
Yeah, that would be the championships then. I think we can see her there. I think this is a very good result by her, something she can build on, and as Twan already said after the men's race, hopefully something we can build on. Honsinger in 12th, final touch upon her. This is kind of where I expected her. This parcours was just too fast for her because the women's raced in bone dry conditions.
She had a terrible start as well. You know how you have like the life ticker. It's a bit useless sometimes, but for Honsinger, I think I saw her like down in like 30th place, like all in the first lap. Like, the starts are just absolutely terrible, and it's unfortunate because she has a lot of talent in those legs.
Hopefully she can improve a bit. The next course in Fayetteville, Arkansas should suit her a bit better. We're going there on Wednesday. There will be a preview podcast coming up to that as well. I think we've covered everything here for the Cyclocross World Cup in Waterloo. Twan and Issam, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks.
The next podcast is the preview podcast of the World Cup in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Catch you guys then. Goodbye.